And we are finally live. Hey, everybody, I'm Haley Graham, the founder of Women's Entrepreneur Network. I'm excited to be here with you tonight. I'm here with my friend, Velma Gallant, and we're going to talk about keeping work and home and everything separate so they're not all sliding into each other, so you're not working 24 hours a day, especially, now that we're all working from home, work hygiene practices.
Yeah.
And, talking about how do we guard our time, our effort, our energy in a world where we are working from home, because I'm obviously working from home because I have my business from home. I could have an office, but it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. And my husband works from home. He's been working from home for, 2.5 years now. We never thought that would ever happen. And, we've had to each, in the time that we've been working from home, set up some practices so that we are not working 24/7. I will admit freely, my husband is actually better at this than I am. And there are some things that we both do that, definitely help. I will say that, it can be really tempting to just go sit on my computer and get lost in something, because for me, work is kind of my hobby. My hobby is kind of my work, and I can get lost. But I've also learned to have some break, or I will sit here in atrophy.
Yeah. I think especially if it's something that you're really passionate about or you really enjoy, I think it is really easy to head down that road. Well, just a little bit longer, just a little bit longer.
Just a little more.
Just a little bit more. And it ends up being that all of the sudden, before we realize it, we've burnt ourselves out. I don't know. I don't know if you've ever had that happen to you.
I do it all the time. I do it all the time. And I mean, I will hit a wall and I'm like, oh crap, shouldn't do that. And to me it's interesting because I think that's pretty common. I hear from a lot of people that they get stuck working on stuff 24/7.
Yeah.
And even in a world of, everybody's working from home, I've seen my husband's company enforce mandatory days off because they've seen such a spike in productivity that they're worried that their employees are going to burn out.
Yeah.
And I don't have an employer who's looking out at me and saying, hey, maybe you should not have worked 95 hours this week.
Right. I know I'm very protective of my weekends. So last weekend, I had made arrangements that I was going to get my winter tires put on, and then I was going to go down and see my family because I wanted to make sure that I saw them before I couldn't get down there as often as I would like to. So it's about a 2-hour drive, and it ended up snowing really bad that day. And for a first snow, of course, nobody knows how to drive when that first snow hits. Forgotten. We have 6 months of snow here, but that first snow, everybody forgets. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to be driving in this. And so I ended up staying at home, and it was a better decision than the one I'd actually made for my weekend, because it had been a really busy week. I had accomplished a lot. I had a lot of deadlines and obligations and all of that kind of stuff. And so not going anywhere this weekend was better for me. The snow took care of me because I wasn't going to.
Yeah, totally. I find sometimes the dogs take care of me because I might not otherwise. Literally, they have to be fed. They have to be taken out for walks.
Yeah.
And where I might be tempted to not go out walking for myself, what I have learned is that our lives are much better if we walk dogs
Mm.
regularly on longer walks, more than just around the house, which would be easier. Um, and so, we move the times for this live based on, okay, has Haley had time to go walk the blinking dogs yet? And, the dogs
Mhm.
are doing dog things and giving me some time off. But yeah, I mean, it's important to have time that is not on the computer, time that's not strictly thinking about work. Um, I find it's also more productive because one of the things that my husband was observing is that, and I do the same thing a lot of times if I'm working through a problem in my head, um, I can't get through it if I sit here and stare at my monitor, or if
Mm.
I'm on YouTube or I'm doing whatever. My brain is just too active. If I can walk away from the desk for a couple of hours during the day and take a break, you know, go eat lunch and not sit at the computer eating,
Mhm.
mindlessly eating, go and sit at the kitchen table and take a literal break. A lot of times things will become patently obvious to me if I will just go do what I think I need to do.
Mhm. Yeah.
I
I
don't know what
well,
happens.
I know, so I take 99% time. Like there's times where stuff just happens and I don't do it,
Hmm.
but 99% of the time I take my lunch break. And I mean, I've shared it before. I have a Facebook lunch with my mom every Monday.
Hmm.
And and I literally am. Like I walk out of my office. I'll actually take my computer into the kitchen and sit at my kitchen table visiting with mom because it gets
Hmm.
me out of my office. And same thing, and after work, um, more often than not, I try to get in at least 3, hopefully 4 walks in after work, and I do that right when work is done and before supper,
Hmm.
and then I'll have supper. Just to have that breath between the working that I'm doing and the eating that I should do.
Hmm. Yeah, no, and I do something similar. I take the dogs to the dog park at roughly 5 o'clock. Sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a tiny bit later, but they get really insistent about it's time to be fed.
Mhm.
We go to the dog park and then come home, eat dinner, and one of us takes the dogs to the dog park. So it's usually me. And then we eat dinner and then we take the dogs back out again for another walk.
Mhm.
And given the time of year, given the fact that it's dark outside, yes, we take them to downtown where I live, which has several parks in very close proximity that are actually fairly well lit. And we walk dogs and then come back. And then I get started up for round two for the night, which is usually where people aren't bugging me and pinging me and binging and booping. And I actually get most of the work of my actual business done.
Mhm. Do you have a delineation in the morning too between waking up and starting your work too? Because
I usually
I
do.
know I do. I have my workouts and my journaling process that I do before I start working.
Yeah, I set my alarm and I wake up and I do about 15 to 20 minutes of meditations. Um, and then I get up and, run through getting dressed and getting ready and all the things. Um, Go out, go to Starbucks, usually involves packing all the dogs into the car for Starbucks and giving them their pop cups and doing all the things. And yeah, so we have a whole routine in the morning that is, pretty morning-ish based. I'm not the earliest person up in the mornings, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important to have those lines between the different parts of our lives. I think it supports them so that they don't start bleeding into each other.
I think that that's important. And I also think that it's important to be mindful of how much time we're actually working versus how much time we're pretending to be working.
Right?
Hmm.
Yep.
How much time has Haley pretended to be working when she's actually watching, or, researching something when she's actually watching YouTube videos on whatever.
Yep. Been there, done that. What I started doing is, if I'm purposefully distracting myself from work that I need to get done,
Mm-hmm.
then I get up and I go do my dishes. It's like, if you're not going to do the work you're supposed to be doing, I at least want to do something that moves me forward, because I'm going to have to do those dishes anyways. So I might as well use them as that pause. Because I mean, you mentioned it earlier about how sometimes if you're just staring at the computer, you're not actually solving the problem. And I can be like that too, but that's when I'll usually pick this thing up to kind of pull my brain away from what it is that I'm not quite getting to the end of. But then every once in a while, I actually think to do something that's of value for me to do as that pause, instead of the mindless pause.
Well, and one of the things that I find, for me with the mindless pause that you're talking about, is that it's not as mindless as we think it is. So we're not actually I'm not giving my brain the break it needs. And what I find is that I'm like up here, and that it's, not ever really letting me come down fully.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I know my walks are probably more mindless than anything. Doing the dishes is definitely more mindless.
Right.
But at least I feel like I've accomplished something with that little period of time that I know I'm going to have to do anyways. But mindless or mindful? I find my walks, I'm not, I don't know that I'd use the word mindless for that. I'm putting my mind on pause and letting it follow a natural flow. I'm not distracting it.
Right. Well, and that's that difference between intentionally, bringing your brain back into itself and kind of focusing your energy back to yourself and that focus, on what you're doing. And yes, your subconscious mind is doing its thing versus, okay, I'm continuing to feed my brain, as if it's from a fire hose. Because when we're watching videos or we're doing whatever on our phones, we're really not allowing our brain that downtime to focus on doing that whatever in the background. So that's why things like walking or doing a maze or any of those types of activities, coloring is another good one. Puzzles allow the subconscious mind to do its thing to figure out the problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, I like that. It lets our energy switch over to the subconscious versus it still being used by something that's useless.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah. And thus, once you start thinking about, okay, we're letting the subconscious mind do its thing, it becomes easier. And the other thing too is just remembering that there's some interesting studies about humans and productivity and brains and productivity. There's a real decrease in productivity after a certain number of hours we work a week.
Yes.
And it's about 45 or so, believe it or not. So a lot of us as entrepreneurs want to go, 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 go. And there's a bit of this like culture of, she who can stand longest, she who can do it longest, or he can, who can, muscle through it and do with only 3 hours of sleep a night, the reality is that you can only be productive for so long doing that. And I mean, the human body is not designed for that kind of stressor level.
Mm-hmm.
And there are studies, you and I mean, I've seen it myself. I can muscle through stuff for short periods of time, and I certainly did that when I was at Duke. I certainly did it when I had
Mm-hmm.
very small children. But you know I would say overall, what I've learned is that my brain is productive a certain number of hours a day, and that I get about 7 and 7.5 hours a day of true, focused, concentrated energy to really create.
Mm-hmm.
I have probably another 3 or 4 hours a day that are kind of like shoulder hours that I think of as like I can do email, I can do correspondence, I can do simple tasks, rote tasks that don't require deep levels of thought. But when I get to that like deep levels of thought, if I try to extend it past that, like multiple days in a row, I
Mm-hmm.
can do 1 or 2 days where I go, no problem. But when I go past that and I start pushing past that, um, it just I can see my productivity drop, and I can see
Mm-hmm.
how I'm just like literally a crispy frittered, bundle of nerves.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. I've been observing that there are certain times that I'm more productive than other times. And I've also been observing that
Mm-hmm.
there's a certain amount of time that I'm productive for. And if I try to push it past that amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
then it starts dropping, effectiveness starts dropping off really fast. And I'd be
Yeah,
better, and
it's
I'd
almost
be
like a
better
cliff.
off. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. And so I noticed that in small bits of my day that I reached that cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And really, do I want to be a lemming like everybody else and just dive off it? But I also noticed that in the bigger time capacity, where if
Mm-hmm.
I've been working really hard for a couple of days, then the fourth and fifth day I'm not as productive either,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And I start falling off that cliff.
And sorry for the grimaces. I have a cat who is kneading in my shoulder, getting some catch-a-puncture going on. Yeah, no, I do the same thing. I've noticed I can do it the first 2 or 3 days. Days 4 and 5, I can tell that it starts to, and then if I try to push it through into the weekend, then I'm screwed. And one of the things that I learned when I was back in corporate was that if I tried to push through both days of the weekend, because I would work 5 days during the week and then I would have the weekends off to get stuff done.
Right?
And if I
Yeah.
tried to use both days of the weekend to get stuff done, I won't say worthless during the week, but I would say that I noticed a distinctly lower level of productivity, during the week
Yeah.
because I just was exhausted. And it doesn't just come back. You don't just get one night of sleep and it comes back. Oh no. Especially with little kids in the house and stuff. It's multiple
Mm-hmm.
days and your body will fight you.
Yep.
And I mean, I will say that I do have my little enforcers here that enforce, okay, it's time to go to bed, mom. We want to cuddle. We want to snuggle. We're going to be trouble, and we're going to make sure that you take some time off. Case in point, right here.
Yeah.
Mom, you're
Well,
not paying enough attention to me. So therefore, I'm going to put my tail in your face.
Yep. I think it's really it's easy to not do it, and it's important to do it.
Absolutely.
And I notice a big difference. I notice a big difference in the amount of productivity and the quality of productivity when I'm putting those proper pauses in, and when I'm giving, the subconscious its time to do the
Yeah.
stuff in the background, right?
Same.
Yeah.
And, and that's part of why it's important in your business to have time that is dedicated to planning and time that is dedicated to execution. And trying to do planning and execution at the same time doesn't work. And that's part of why some business owners have to do retreats and put everything else on pause to be able to go off and go do the planning. Because if you can't give yourself that time to think through things, it's really hard to do them.
I think there's another P that needs to be in there, and that's playing.
Playing is important. Playing is super important.
Plan, produce, and play.
Yeah, absolutely.
P cubed.
Very. We'll trademark that here just as soon as we get off the live. But seriously, planning, producing, playing, and being mindful of which stage you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And of your self-care. I think that the self-care piece is so underrated, and the time that it takes to do it.
Pausing. There we go. What is it? It's not
quad.
Quad P. Oh no.
P to the fourth. Oh, that sounds really bad. But anyway, I think I'm going to try to talk her into her bed, perhaps. We can talk her into sleeping in her cat bed here. She's not looking like she agrees with that.
Go touch the treats. Touch the treats. She'll move.
No, she knows they're there and she's not really interested in them right now, but I can maybe talk her into sleeping in her cat bed or sitting in her cat bed for a bit. I'm just going to look like I have a cat tail sticking out of my head for a bit. There she goes.
Oh, there. Now we're cozy.
Yeah. But she's going to hang her head over the side and let me know that she's not happy at being left there.
Yeah.
And, distractions are occasionally good too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. Cool. We need them.
We do. Self-care, distractions, and scheduled self-care and distractions.
Yeah. Because especially if you're like me, where, I sometimes wonder if I have ADHD, because sometimes I can get zoned into something so hard. And then there's other times where it's hard to get me zoned into something. But if
that's normal.
Maybe it is. Well, yeah, it is. It is normal. No matter what, it is normal. But I call them pre-programmed decisions. Right? I might not necessarily put it in my calendar, but I have a pre-programmed decision for these things.
Absolutely. And a pre-programmed schedule that makes them happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's those routines that are so important in our lives, mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally.
Yeah.
All the things. Nutritionally, all of the things. Very cool. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. This has been fun.
This was another great discussion. They're always good, though.
These are always fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about taking care of ourselves so we can take care of life and take care of business. Take care, y'all.
Taking care of business.